for the sport science, it's almost 500 to 600 per year. Yeah.
It's a lot.
We have in Indonesia, we have 260 million people. So 800 is small enough. Can we start now?
Oh, all right, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
May I have your attention, please? Our guest lecture today is about to begin, so please be prepared. And thank you very much for preparing yourself to join our guest lecture. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Good morning, everyone. How are you today? I hope all is well and in a good health, right? We still apply protocols to prevent coronavirus anywhere and anytime. So, the Honorable Dean Faculty of Sport Science, Universitas Negeri Semarang, Profesor Dr. Tandio Rahayu. The Honorable Invited Speaker, Professor Cheng, Ming, PhD, from Department of Physiology, Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya. The Honorable Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, Faculty of Sport Science, Universitas Negeri Semarang, Associate Professor Dr. Malul Azam. And the Honorable Associate Professor Sri Sumartiningsih, as a person in charge in this guest lecture. Dear all lecturers and honorable participant of this guest lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Wahyu Ragil Kurniawan, the moderators for today's guest lecture. I'm very happy to see you here and welcome all of you to this guest lecture. Today's guest lecture is about sweat, blood, urine, and homeostasis with special guest lecture, special invited speaker from University of Malaya, Prof. Cheng Hwee. But before we jump to the main session, we will heard together in the first agenda, we will heard together welcoming speech from our Dean. So the Honorable Professor Dr. Tandio Rahayu, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Bapak Wahyu Ragil. Good morning, everyone. First, let's say thank you to the Almighty for the all blessing that have been given to all of us today. I hope you all are healthy and happy. To our honorable guest today, Professor Cheng Ming from University of Malaya, Malaysia. Once again, Professor, I'm Tandio Rahayu, Dean of the Faculty of Sport Science, Universitas Negeri Semarang. And on the behalf of faculty, I would like to thank you very much for your willingness to spend your valuable time to share your knowledge and experiences with us. Hopefully, in the future, we can establish a more comprehensive collaboration. Thank you very much once again, Professor, and to all of the attendees today, welcome to this useful and precious lecture. Thank you very much. Back to you, Ragil.
Thank you very much, Prof. Tandio, for your warm welcome to us. And we would like to say thank you also to Prof. Tandio for giving us opportunity to have time to join in this guest lecture with Prof. Cheng. Thank you very much, Prof. Tandio. Then to the all distinguished guests, if you don't mind, if you have another agenda, we are allowed you to continue to the other agenda. But you are also very welcome if you can come back and join with us until the guest lecture over. Thank you very much. Right, so for the next agenda, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker today is Prof. Cheng Ming, PhD. He is one of the lecturer of University of Malaya, who's expertise in physiology. And before we start the presentation, begin, let me tell you the rules and how the presentation will go. And of course, I will maybe read a short CV from Prof. Cheng. Let me start the screen. Wait for a minute. It's still working. Right here. Okay, is it clear for my screen? Okay, so I'm gonna read one by one. The first is the rules for participant. The rule for participant, and number one. Wait, I tried to make it bigger, but still on process. Okay, so wait. Yeah, the rules for participants. So the all parties to read and kindly check, then make sure to be paying attention, please. For the host, please could you please help me to mute the all participants here? Thank you. Okay, the rules number one, please turn on your camera and turn off your microphone. This is the rules number one. Then number two, please change your display name for the Zoom with the format name underscore institution. For example, John Davis underscore UNES. The rules number three, please behave appropriately during the guest lecture. Number four, questions can be asked directly after being allowed by a moderator or through the chat menu. Five, in the end of virtual guest lecture, it will be informed the URL of e-certificate issuance, so do not leave the Zoom. And number six, the link is active for only 60 minutes after this guest lecture is over. Then, next slide is about, I'm going to read a short CV from Professor Cheng Ming. Actually, he has a lot of experience, but you can check by yourself by visiting the University of Malaya website. So here, from his biography, his PhD in England was in the area of human immunology, using the human model of placenta to wait. Okay, sorry. Right. His PhD in England was in the area of human immunology, using the human model of placenta to investigate mechanism relating to the paradoxical successful transplantation of the fetal placenta allograft onto the mother during a normal pregnancy. His initial research in Department of Physiology, University of Malaya, continues with immunology with a special interest in natural physiologic autoantibodies. Prof. Cheng is a honorary professor, Department of Physiology, Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya. His focused interest in physiology education has been recognized by the International Union for Physiological Sciences, or IUPS, by the invitation to be part of the IUPS Planning Committee for the 2013 IUPS Congress in England. Then next, for the research interest, his research interest is on immunogenic epitopes, natural physiologic autoantibodies, free radical antioxidant, immunomodulation of oxidized lipoproteins. And for the academic qualification, his PhD on 1983 UK Immunology, Liverpool University, Liverpool, UK, and his PhD 1980 UK Liverpool University at UK. And then the last administrative duties, I'm gonna read the last 5 years because he has a lot of experience. So I just will read 5 last years from his administrative duties. First, Supervisor National 2016 to 2018. Second, Chairman initiate the first inter-program physiology among medical, dental, pharmacy, and biomedical students to motivate interest and learning among students of physiology 2011 to 2018. Chairman initiated to the annual physiology learning trade to promote enjoyment in student learning 2010 to 2018. Then fourth, Chairman initiated the inter-tutorial medical physiology, to enhance students' learning between tutorial groups 2009 to 2018. Then the last, Chairman Intermedical School Physiology Quiz initiated 2003 at 9 IMSPQ July 2011. 48 medical schools from 18 countries compete international 2003 to 2018. Okay, that's all short CV from Prof. Cheng. It's really interesting. Now, allow me to welcome our invited speaker, Prof. Cheng Ming, with topic sweat, blood, urine, and homeostasis. To make his presentation, Prof. Cheng, the screen is yours. I'm sorry, you still on mute, Mr. Cheng? Prof.
Thank you,
Cheng?
Dodo.
Yes.
Sorry, can I share screen on my side so that I can control it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so let me share screen. Unless there's some technicality, I will let you know. Yeah, so that I can control. Okay.
Okay, wait.
Thank you.
The host, please. Could you please to help me to set Prof. Cheng as the host?
Yeah, I think I can see it now. Yeah. Shall I try?
Okay, please.
Can you see the screen?
Okay, cool.
Okay, right. So yeah, so can you see the slide? And my sound is okay?
Good.
Okay. So first of all, thank you again. I call her Dr. Titin. She has a very long name for welcoming me to speak to your students at quite a short notice. Yeah, so I'm speaking mainly to sports science, and of course, you need quite a lot of physiology in sports science. And so although the audience is not medical students, so sometimes I tell my colleagues that when you're teaching to other programs like nursing, maybe sports science and other programs, it's sometimes harder to try to simplify a great amount of physiology into about 45 minutes so that the audience can appreciate the fundamental and essential points here. So for this talk, since you are sports science person, I thought of talking about sweating. So obviously when you exercise, you sweat. And this picture of Winston Churchill is, I thought of his phrase, sweat, blood, and tears. That is his very famous speech before Second World War. And of course, he was the one in charge of Britain's entry in the Second World War. So his phrase, the famous phrase, blood, toil, sweat, and tears. So this phrase this morning, sweat, initially it was just sweat, urine, homeostasis. And I decided to link together the importance of obviously the blood because inside the body. So what comes out of the body, sweat, urine, are not just excretion of excess fluid or body fluid, but the sweat and the urine is obviously linked to the extracellular fluid, and blood volume is obviously one of the components of the extracellular fluid. And I hope to show how all this is linked to the concept of homeostasis. So when you learn physiology, you have to keep thinking about how things are related to homeostasis, the maintenance of the constancy of the internal environment. Yeah. So, so this picture, which may not mean very much to you, but I'll show it at least 2-3 times, is one of the recent way in which we try to organize small pieces of information in my own way. So this is a triangle. So, and we've now called this phi geometric, combination of physiology and geometry. So we're calling this word, and this is now in a published paper that I'll be happy to share with the audience. So just, and this reminds me that students listening, don't be in a hurry to take down notes. I've tried to simplify the lecture, but still there can be quite complex slides. So I will share this set of PowerPoint slide through Dr. Titin to all of you. So after the talk, so you're welcome to have my slide. And also I will leave with you my contact number at the end, so that in case you have further questions, and we can also follow up. So anyway, back to this phi geometric diagram. So obviously we have the two things that we want to talk about: sweat and urine. And the red triangle is obviously the blood. Okay, sweat, blood, and urine. And obviously we want to talk about homeostasis. So right at the beginning, you see two words on the line here. One is obviously temperature. So sweating is actually linked to homeostatic thermoregulation. And I think most of you will appreciate that. And we'll talk about this in a short while. But sweating also contributes to some interesting physiologic mechanism. And then secondly, most of the second part of the lecture will be on urine. So when we think of urine, we think that it's just excretion, but it is more than just excretion. So production of urine is part of homeostasis. So which means I tell students that going to toilet is performing homeostatic work. I hope that becomes, so every time you go to the washroom, homeostasis is being performed. And I'll explain what that means. Because for example, in today's talk, we talk about the control of water balance, H2O here, and the control of sodium balance. By the way in which different amounts of water and different amounts of sodium is excreted in the urine to compensate for changes in water balance and sodium balance in the extracellular fluid. So I hope I give you this big picture now, and then we will move on. Okay. So let's move on to the second slide. I think it's a question. So this is just homeostasis drawn by one of my friends. So you have the keywords: control, regulate, and this is something I inherited from my late auntie. It was in the house. I like this word. When you are learning physiology, you have to think. And so you have maintenance of the constant concentration and parameters in the ECF, extracellular fluid, balance. That's important. We're talking about balance. And obviously the important concept of negative feedback. Okay, they're all here. Okay, so let's come to the first question. So I try to interact with you by asking big questions, and I hope. So the first question is sweat and urine. Okay, so you have three choices here. Sweat is derived from ECF, from blood, or both ECF and blood. Okay, the same question for urine. Is urine derived from ECF, from blood, or both ECF and blood? So I will give you the answer here, because this is not a face-to-face interaction. So the complete answer is actually the last one, both ECF and blood, because the blood is just a component of ECF. So when you sweat, actually, it obviously comes from ECF. It may seem strange to say that your sweat comes from the blood, but it does, because any fluid that comes up from your body, whether it's saliva or it's sweat, has to come from your capillaries. So the capillary blood that supplies your sweat glands is the one that produces the secretion. Okay, so sweat is from both ECF and obviously the blood that supplies your sweat glands. Now, the second one is urine from ECF, from blood, or both. Again, the answer is from both. Okay, so the final product, urine, obviously comes from filtration of your blood, your plasma, and plasma is a component of ECF. So again, the filtration and final excretion of urine volume. Yeah, so actually initially comes from ECF. So by controlling the amount of concentration and volume of urine that you excrete from the body, you are actually controlling, providing homeostasis of the ECF. Okay, so since this is about exercise, I show you a picture of my grandson. He lives in Sabah, and here he is trying to play football. Yeah. Okay, right. Okay, so these are my three main points. Yes, and I will talk about this. So last one, we start from the last one. Blood is always isotonic. So which means that here we're talking about one of the importance of parameter to control homeostasis in the ECF or blood, they are related, is osmolarity. Okay, it has to be kept constant. So the normal osmolarity is related to something about 300 milliosmol per liter. So that would be an isotonic situation. Now, when we talk of the two things today, sweat. Now, sweat is always hypotonic. Now, this is just a fact, okay? But I'll tell you why this is important. And in my next slide, then further down, I will say to you that sweat is always wonderfully hypotonic. Yeah, because it's hypotonic, you can produce some compensation. Okay. Now the second one is that that urine is sometimes hypotonic. Yeah. So this is playing around with words. Sometimes hypotonic. Obviously, sometimes it can be hypertonic. Okay. So obviously, when you produce urine that is hypotonic, dilute urine, you are compensating for excess water in the body. And when you exercise and are dehydrated, your urine will always be hypertonic. So here again, it is a compensation for the fact that you need water when you are dehydrated, and so the urine volume is decreased. Okay, so these three phrases we will develop in a short while. The first one, sweat is always hypotonic. Okay, so when you lose sweat, you lose more sweat as you exercise more. Obviously, water is lost, but you also lose some sodium chloride mainly in your sweat. Okay, but it's a dilute, very dilute salt solution, but you still lose some sodium. So your total body sodium in your body is also less. And of course, your total body water. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. Okay, I'm not sure whether you have done your body fluid physiology already. So, so this is the extracellular fluid outside the cell, ECF. This is the intracellular fluid. Okay. Now, this is not in proportion. Actually, if you think about the total amount of water in the body, most of it is actually in the cell, 2/3. Okay. So this is drawn so that you can have space to write things here. Yeah. But actually, the volume of the intracellular fluid is twice greater. And we will see why this is important, because the larger volume of the water in the cell can provide like a reservoir to compensate. Okay, so let me explain what this is. So pi is the symbol for osmotic pressure. Okay, we're talking about osmolarity here. So the main osmotic pressure that determines the movement of fluid or water from the inside to the outside is the osmotic pressure due to sodium. Sodium is the main determinant of the osmotic pressure in the extracellular fluid. Now, this osmotic pressure due to, in the capillary C, is the osmotic pressure that is due to plasma protein. So we call this the oncotic, what do you call that? The oncotic pressure, okay? Now, so now when you sweat, it is always dilute, hypotonic solution. So what happens to your ECF from where the sweat comes from? The ECF will obviously reduce in volume, right? So you use the word contraction. The ECF will also become more concentrated, and so the osmolarity in the ECF will become higher. So if you combine decrease in the volume, contraction, and increase in osmolarity of ECF, you call this situation hypertonic contraction. Okay, so let's summarize. When you sweat, hypotonic sweat, the ECF becomes hypertonically contracted. Okay, now, so what happens now is that water always moves when there is a change in osmolarity. Okay, so now after sweating, before you drink water, the outside is more hyperosmotic compared to the inside, right? So in which direction will the water move? This is a basic concept of osmolarity. Water from the inside, this again, larger volume of water in the cell now begins to move outside. So this is actually compensation now. Okay, before even we talk about hormones like ADH. So when you sweat, hypotonic sweat, this one becomes hypertonic, and then there is shift of fluid from the inside to the outside. Okay, so that helps to compensate for the ECF volume. So which means that, let's say if you sweat 500 ml of fluid, your ECF is not reduced by 500 because of this compensation. Maybe it's reduced by 450 because you have some compensatory shift from the inside of the cell to the outside. Okay, so that is why the next slide says that. Let me put it in a sentence for you, since English may not be the first language that you use, and I may be speaking just a little bit fast, even though I'm trying to speak slowly. So sweat is wonderfully hypotonic so that there can be fluid efflux from inside to outside compensation from the intracellular fluid reservoir. As I mentioned, 2/3 are inside the cell to the ECF after the sweat loss. Okay, so that is why because sweat is dilute, it actually performs a function. Now let's move on to something else. Okay, so this is the picture here. So obviously, as we said earlier, when you sweat, it is a very important part of thermoregulation, because when the sweat evaporates, some of the heat is also leaves the body. Okay, the latent heat of vaporization, isn't it? That's what we call it. You may call it differently in Bahasa Indonesia. So thermoregulation is important when you sweat, and this is due to, now let's connect it to some physiologic nerve. This is part of the sympathetic nerves, but unusual because these sympathetic nerves secrete not noradrenaline, but acetylcholine. So we call this cholinergic sympathetic nerves to the sweat glands that causes sweating, and that helps to maintain the body temperature. Okay, so now I'm going to move now to the other side to talk about the control of water balance as well as sodium balance after you exercise. Okay, now before that, I want to make one point, and that is in sodium physiology, we're obviously interested in sodium because, as I said, every time you sweat, you will lose sodium. Okay, you lose sodium from the body. How does the body recovers the sodium, and how does the body recovers the loss of water? Okay, so there are two things to recover when you sweat. You recover water, and you recover sodium. That means when you sweat or after you sweat, you are in negative water balance, you are in negative sodium balance. So you need to normalize the balance. Okay. Now before that, let me maybe show you another physiometric diagram. Okay, so now we look at the role of the kidney. So I don't know whether you understand this pun. We are concentrating. Yeah, because one of the role of kidney is to produce a concentrated urine. So so kidneys are like students. They try to concentrate, but of course, different thing. Yeah, so if you are able to concentrate like the kidney, I'm sorry, if the kidneys can produce concentrated urine, actually what it means is that the kidneys can conserve water when you need to recover water. Okay. Now let me show you this physiometric diagram, one of my favorite. So so we talk about water balance. Water balance is linked to osmoregulation, and it is linked to sodium concentration. Okay. So let's go back to the example of exercise. when you exercise, what happens? You are in negative water balance. Okay, when you exercise, when you sweat. So what happens to osmolarity? It becomes higher. Your body fluid become hyperosmotic. Okay, what happens to the sodium concentration? Obviously, since sodium concentration mainly determines osmolarity, you are also hypernatremic. Okay, so negative water balance, higher osmolarity, and higher sodium concentration, they are all actually linked. And so when the body maintains water balance, it is also osmoregulating, it is also controlling sodium concentration. So this Phi geometric diagram helps you to remember this, and that's why I put this coffee here. I drink a lot of coffee, so this is like 3-in-1 coffee. Okay, three of these parameters actually means the same thing: osmoregulation, water balance, and sodium concentration control. Okay, now the next slide is a slide that I will show at least 3 times. I think it's quite a complicated slide. But it's a very nice slide. Normally, I think you already, so normally I will tell students before a complicated slide, please fasten your seatbelt, get ready for the next slide. So it's quite useful to warn your student if there's a complicated slide. So you prime their brain so that they're prepared. Yeah. This is if they do not have the PowerPoint slide before your lecture. Okay. So here we are. Fasten your seatbelt. There you are. Okay. So it's not so complicated, but the actual mechanism is more detailed. But if you're wondering why you have 2 cats here, this is not because I have cats at home. I actually love dogs more than cats. Yeah. So this was a lecture given to another university because we were talking about cat ions. Cat ions reminds you of cat. Okay. So this is sodium is my favorite cat ion. If you ask, so there are 2 cats. So we're talking about sodium cat. This cat is called sodium. Okay. So here on this side is water balance. Okay. And here on this side is sodium balance. So again, this is sweating. Now, actually, you don't have to have the word severe to have this happening. As long as you sweat, okay, you can delete severe. As long as you sweat, you will lose water. You are in negative water balance. As long as you sweat, you will lose sodium, even though sweat is a dilute fluid. Okay, so there are 2 things that needs to compensate after you exercise, and that is you need to recover the water loss. You need to recover the sodium loss. Okay, and so the rest of this lecture is to talk about this. Now, to recover water loss is also the same as to try to reduce the higher sodium concentration. Remember the last picture, this one here. Okay, so this is related. Okay, so here obviously there you are: osmolarity, sodium concentration, and water. If you draw a triangle here. Okay, so here obviously you may have already learned, maybe even before university, the important hormone which is ADH or vasopressin. Okay, so and ADH is detected, is released in this case because the osmolarity that is higher is detected by your brain, actually, by your hypothalamus, by the what is called osmoreceptors, and that releases ADH. ADH, most of you may know, acts in the kidney to conserve water, and so less water is excreted. So this is obviously very rapid response to reabsorb more water by ADH. So you restore the water balance, you restore osmolarity, and you also restore the sodium concentration. But on this side, you need to recover the excess sodium that is lost. So keep in mind, there are 2 different things. Although sodium is mentioned here, sodium is mentioned here. This is sodium concentration, okay, linked to balance, water balance, and osmolarity. Here we want to recover the actual total amount because this one is just recovering the osmolarity, okay? So in order for you to do that, to recover the sodium balance, it requires more complex. It requires more complex mechanism. And this is a good summary here. 2 things. One, you reduce the glomerular filtration rate. This is obviously kidney function. And the second one is that you increase this hormone called aldosterone. Okay, 2 hormones, one ADH, this side. This one is aldosterone. This hormone, aldosterone, some of you may already heard always increase sodium conservation. I mean, reabsorb sodium, and so you tend to lose less sodium in the urine. Okay. Now, when you decrease filtration, glomerular filtration rate in the kidney, basically what is happening is that you are reducing the amount of sodium that is also filtered. Okay. So when you reduce amount of sodium which is filtered, and then you increase more sodium reabsorption, the net effect is that you reduce the amount of sodium in the urine. So remember I said that every time you go to the toilet, you are performing homeostatic work. So which means that the amount of sodium that you excrete in your urine is not just random, you know. It's not just there is sodium in my urine, okay? But if you are in negative sodium balance after you sweat, your urine will have less sodium. If you are, for example, on a high sodium diet, in positive sodium balance, then your urine will have more sodium. It's actually part of compensation. Okay, so the rest of this morning slide will be to explain actually some of the detailed mechanism here. Okay, how aldosterone is formed and what happens here. Okay, so so let me try to simplify it for you, but keep this in mind. Okay, this is basically the picture we want to look at. Now, before I move on, I want to mention a little bit more about ADH here, or vasopressin. So ADH here is mentioned as being affected by osmolarity, but ADH is also affected by volume. So every time you sweat, not only does the osmolarity increases, but your blood volume actually does drop a little bit. Because remember, sweat comes from ECF, comes from blood. Remember, we asked the question. So your blood volume actually does drop. This is before you drink water. So there are two things that will happen. You will drink more water, right? You will ask for water, or you will naturally go for. So the thirst mechanism is another important mechanism. Thirst. As long as you are still conscious, you haven't pengsan after you exercise, you will drink water. Okay. And the second mechanism is obviously from the hypothalamus osmoreceptor and secretion of ADH. Okay. Now I want to mention something that is because the blood volume also drop. The other factors that affects ADH or vasopressin is actually volume sensing. Okay. So the next slide is again where you need to fasten your seatbelt, maybe even tighter. I'll leave the slide, as I said, for you to refer to as you study, because there's no time to go into detail, and so that you can look at it. So this is the one. So basically, here ADH is mentioned here, osmolarity is mentioned there, and thirst mechanism. Okay. So when we talk about controlling water balance, when you sweat, you are dehydrated, you lose volume, some volume, you also increase osmolarity. So both ADH and thirst mechanism helps to compensate. Okay. Now, interestingly, ADH comes from the hypothalamus. The thirst mechanism is also a function of specialized neurons in your brain. Yeah. So some neurons in the brain actually gives you the sensation of thirst. Yeah. So although you think about thirst as your dry mouth, which is also true, there's some impulses from the mouth, but your brain actually produces the sensation of thirst, and this is actually some of your hypothalamic neurons. Okay, so let me leave this slide for you so that we can move on. Okay, so so this is just to engage you. So these are some of my mugs. I have a series of mugs at home that we customize. This is a kidney, one of our focus today, and this is the GI tract. So, so when you want to conserve water, obviously the kidney plays an important role, ADH, and obviously thirst mechanism where you consume water, and this is absorbed. Okay, yeah. So, so okay. So in a normal person in Semarang, so don't have to be Semarang lah, can be Kuala Lumpur. But since I'm talking to people in Semarang, okay, or maybe in a sports science student in Semarang. Anyway, it's just for fun here. Okay, sweat is always hypotonic, so and that is important. Now, so let me add in a bit more information here. Urine is sometimes hypotonic. So, and the range is actually interesting. You can produce a very dilute urine. This is 6 times less than 300, okay? Or it can be very concentrated when you need to conserve water, Okay, so urine osmolarity again is compensation in order to maintain the constancy of the blood osmolarity. Okay, so when the blood or ECF osmolarity changes, the kidney compensates. Okay, and so you can have changes here in order to keep this value here constant. Okay, so this is the concept. Okay, let's move on. Here again, as I said, I'm going to show you this to you again. So we're now on this side here. Okay, so one of the main concept is that every time you lose ECF volume when you sweat, you lose sodium. Yes, that means every time you lose body fluid, here is sweat. It can be vomiting, can be diarrhea or whatever, or it can be just you volunteer for a blood donation. That is also loss of body fluid. So you become negative sodium balance. Okay, so this is the next sentence. ECF and thus blood volume, because blood volume is part of ECF, is determined by the total body sodium or the sodium balance. Okay, so you need to now restore this by reabsorbing more and by filtering less. Okay, so that you excrete less. Okay, so so I have this thing here. Sorry, here we are. Okay, so when you sweat, obviously you are dehydrated, negative water balance. I like to make new words, but please don't use it in an exam. Is that you are also in negative sodium balance. So I was trying to play around with words. Is desodiumation. This is not the physiology word, it's my own word, okay? Or desodium, denation. But this is a private word, so this is for fun, okay? But the main word, the main way this is recognized is negative sodium balance, okay? So now next slide is how the body or how the kidney always responds to sodium balance, okay? So changes in ECF volume, example here is sweating, we're looking at today, is compensated by changes in urinary sodium excretion, okay? Going to washroom is a homeostatic process, okay? So in this case, when you sweat, you are in negative sodium balance. So now you want to excrete less sodium, right? So you filter less sodium and you reabsorb more sodium. It always happens that way. Now under here, I give you two abbreviation. RSN is interesting, and this is a renal sympathetic nerve. Sounds very strange, right? That we're talking about sodium physiology and we're talking about a nerve. But this is actually what is happening. This renal sympathetic nerve is very important in urinary sodium physiology. Likely most of the first year students may not have done renal physiology, so I'm not going to say too much, but just to summarize here. And the other one, which I mentioned a bit more, is a family of hormones. And this family of hormones, most students will remember at the end of their physiology module because it sounds so impressive to be able to memorize this. Renin-Angiotensin Aldosterone System. Okay, so this system, Renin-Angiotensin Aldosterone System, always conserves sodium, reabsorb more sodium. Okay, so let me put it into words. So activation of the Renin-Angiotensin Aldosterone System, RAAS, always occurs during fluid loss when negative sodium occurs. So our example of fluid loss here today is sweating. Okay, and RAAS always conserves sodium, meaning that it will always lead to decreased sodium excretion. Okay. So the first molecule is renin. Okay, and then once renin is formed, renin comes from kidney. Yeah? Once this is formed, automatically it's like a almost like your cascade that you learn about blood clotting. It's an automatic reaction that will always produce aldosterone, and then that will conserve sodium. Okay, so the next slide is for your reference again because it's fairly complex. There are actually 3 ways by which renin is formed. Okay, 3 ways. And one of the ways is actually the nerve I just mentioned, the renal sympathetic nerves. Okay, so when you exercise, you will remember that you always activate your sympathetic system, right? When you exercise. So when you exercise, the sympathetic system is increased. It is also increased to the kidney And so the renal sympathetic nerves will already increase renin when you exercise. Okay, and obviously this is important for you to conserve sodium. Okay, so the next slide for your reference, for the sake of completeness, then besides the renal sympathetic nerves, there are two other ways in which renin will be increased when you sweat. Yeah, because you are in negative sodium balance. Okay, so this is a slide. Okay, so let's look at it in this big picture. So when you start from the top, here it says decreased plasma volume, right, in green. Okay, so which means you can put a word here, negative sodium balance, right? Now, before you look at what is in the middle, look at what happens at the end. Decreased volume, meaning negative sodium balance. This will always happen. You will decrease sodium excretion because you want to conserve sodium so that you can recover the volume because of the link between volume and sodium. Okay, so this always happens. Now, if you want to decrease sodium, you must have aldosterone. Okay, we go backwards. If you want to have aldosterone, you must have renin. It comes from the RAS. Okay, and here just mentions the three ways in which renin will be increased. One, we just mentioned, the renal sympathetic nerve, RSN. Okay, now the other two ways, if you have not done renal physiology, keep this as a reference. One is an interesting structure that reminds you of McDonald, but this is not McDonald. This is called Macula Densa. Okay, this is a structure in the kidney called Macula Densa. So I leave you here. Okay. Yeah, and then the second stimulus is actually a direct stimulus at the structure called the efferent arteriole, just before the glomerulus. And so when this structure detects the drop in the pressure because of volume drop, it will also release renin. Okay, so obviously this happens when you are hypovolemic. Okay, right. So yeah, so basically I just leave this for you for reference. So let me see. Okay, so this is again summary. So today we're looking at sweat, urine, blood, and how these are all linked by homeostasis. Okay, so when you sweat, you are hypertonically contracted. There is compensation of fluid from the inside of the cell to outside. But of course, sweating is important homeostatically because of thermoregulation. When you sweat, because of the negative water balance and the negative sodium balance, the kidney can respond by excreting a concentrated high osmolarity urine, and also the amount of sodium in the urine will be less. This is all part of compensation. Okay, so that's why I want to show you this diagram again. Okay, now I don't know whether we have time or else I may want to stop here. Let's see. Oh, okay. I think I have a few more slides. I'll just run through quickly so that there won't be information overload to tell you what those slides means. Okay, so I just wanted to add on. This is the main concept today, but since we are talking about sympathetic, obviously this is one of the main things that happen. Sympathetic activity always increases to your heart, to your veins, and so on. So I want to summarize and ask the question now, and that is, okay, during exercise, does sympathetic activity to the different organs increase, decrease, or both increase and decrease? So naturally, you would think most of the time it increases. Are there organs where the sympathetic activity actually decrease? Answer is yes. So again, the more complete picture is both increase and decrease. Okay, so most of it is increase. I will have a list in a short while. But actually, in two important organs, you do not find significant action of sympathetic, and that's important in what is happening during exercise for homeostasis. Okay, so let me run through the list of things I want to make. Sorry. Okay, so this is for your reference, and this I think is sympathetic activity during exercise. So obviously in the heart, you have increased heart rate, not mentioned here, increased contraction. Coronary blood flow is also increased by sympathetic, but not indirectly. That means we're not talking about sympathetic vasodilator nerve. It is because as the sympathetic makes the heart more active, you release vasodilator metabolites, and that increases the blood flow. So it's an indirect action, okay? So direct action, increase heart rate, increase stroke volume, that produces the contractility. As the heart is working harder, it produces vasodilator metabolites, which then matches by increased blood flow, okay? In the veins, obviously, you know that the sympathetic also causes venoconstriction that tends to improve the venous return. So obviously, this is important to sustain a greater cardiac output. Now, in the adrenal glands, you have what is known as the Sympatho adrenal medullary axis, very long name. This is because every time you increase sympathetic activity, you also increase the secretion of catecholamines from the adrenal medulla, because the adrenal medulla is innervated by the sympathetic nerves. Okay, so this produces mainly adrenaline, and obviously adrenaline will enhance and supplement the effect of sympathetic on the heart. Okay, now in the arterioles, now this is very interesting, because if you think about the basic hemodynamic relationship, blood pressure is CO times TPR, and you want to maintain a slightly higher blood pressure during exercise. So you would think that the total peripheral resistance should logically be increased, right? Because you want to increase the blood pressure during exercise. But actually, depending on how heavy is the exercise, your TPR can actually drop during exercise. And so this is because the skin, as we just said, skin is important for thermoregulation. It will vasodilate. And so the vasodilation of the cutaneous blood vessel to thermoregulate actually causes the TPR to drop. It contributes to a decrease. And then secondly, in the muscle, obviously, if your muscles are more active, that means the blood flow must be more. So you actually have more vasodilation in the muscle. And this again, like the heart, is due to vasodilator metabolites. And so what we are saying here is that there are two major organs that will have a lot of vasodilation during exercise. One is the skin to maintain temperature, and the other one is obviously the muscle. So if this vasodilate, then the tendency is to decrease TPR. But because your heart is pumping stronger, your cardiac output is still able to maintain a slightly higher blood pressure during exercise. Okay, so to the question, increase or decrease. So the decrease here obviously refers to that in the skin and the muscle, you actually have less sympathetic action, but you have more here. Now to the kidney, we just mentioned the renal sympathetic nerve increases renin, and the renal sympathetic nerve also tends to reduce the filtered sodium. Remember this equation I showed you? Excreted sodium equal to filtered minus reabsorbed. So, so renal sympathetic nerve increases renin. It also decreases filtered load, and the sympathetic nerves also increases reabsorb, because renin produces aldosterone, which increases sodium reabsorption. And just the last point, and that is some of the hormones are reduced by sympathetic activity. And of course, since exercise is a catabolic situation where you need to break down energy source, the sympathetic activity to the pancreas is actually reduced, which makes sense. Okay, so I think this may be a good point to try to stop. The next two are just, this is just from my book, just to remind you of the Sympatho adrenal medullary axis. And this is just, I like to doodle, just to show you the adrenal medulla here. So the black line, just to show you the sympathetic nerve, produces adrenaline. Here, the black line is the renal sympathetic nerve that produces your renin. And renin produces the angiotensin 2 that then produces the aldosterone. So this is involved in blood volume. This is, and so on. Okay. So, so our I think the last few slides, our brain responds to sweating, hypertonic contraction, by restoring water balance and sodium balance. Water balance, as we mentioned, involves ADH and the osmoreceptors in the brain. and also the thirst mechanism, and volume sensors are also involved. And the brain also responds to control sodium balance because it involves the volume sensing and the sympathetic activity to the kidneys, the renal sympathetic nerve. So I leave you again with this diagram, just to remind you that this is what we're talking about today, sweating and the homeostasis together with the renal function in order to maintain the homeostasis of the ECF and also of the blood. So my last slide is to leave you with my contact. So welcome teachers and students to contact me so that we can continue this discussion and conversation. Thank you very much for listening. Back to you, Dr. Wayu.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Cheng. That was an amazing presentation. Thank you for giving us an informative and interesting presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we are on the part of question and answer session. So, if you have a question, then now I need maybe the first 3 questions. So if you have a question, you can type on the chat menu, or maybe just directly open your microphone. So we need 3 questions first. The first session, I think. It's a very yeah, I can say like amazing presentation, because when we joining, when we listening, when Prof Cheng present his slide, we like jump, and we like I can imagine we on inside the body, like we can know where's the blood. then we know the system inside of our body, because homeostasis is like how we can make sure that our body is still on condition in constant, right, Prof Cheng? Not to be too cold, not to be too hot, right? So in a constant. Yeah. So please, everyone in the chat menu, if you have a question, please write down on the chat menu. Then Prof Cheng will give the answer. Ma'am Titin, maybe you have any question?
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be waiting for the participant.
Okay,
Actually, I
just
have a question.
yeah.
But wait.
Oh, okay, for your information, Professor Cheng Ming, in here you got so many greetings from the EIV, Dr. Ermita, Dr. Surya, Ardian, Dr. Agus also in here.
Okay.
Follow in here because not in Zoom meeting, already full, so following in YouTube. And here also have a Associate Professor Setio Rahayu, Dr. Setio Rahayu.
Hello. Hello.
And I would like to ask about your mention about the sympathetic, the last about the anaerobic insulin. Actually, I have the experience. It's my mom, so he got diabetic, not exercise, but he have a sweating, suddenly sweating, but the sweating is not warm, so cool. And what happened, the insulin at the time, and the sweating is too much, and then she feeling down, and the brain feel that want to pingsan. How to say to pingsan? Want to pingsan, and I don't know what should I do, because I just at home, and I just have to make my mom just keep how to say, not to just my mom comes, so give it some drink like Pocari Sweat. I give that. And what do you think? What should I do to give first aid that
Yeah.
the people get diabetic and suddenly sweating too much and they feel dizzy?
Yeah, that's an interesting real life situation. I'm not a clinician, so your mom is on insulin injection?
No, not
No, I see.
insulin. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you're saying that during this happens during exercise, is it?
No, just after 1 hour have a breakfast.
Or breakfast only, yeah. I don't know the reason, but I just put this as an example of how during exercise, although we think mainly of increased sympathetic activity to most of the organs, but in other organs like the skin and the skeletal, and of course in terms of metabolism, actually there's a decrease of sympathetic to insulin secretion, but increase in sympathetic, increase in parasympathetic. The parasympathetic tends to increase insulin. Yeah. So in your mom's situation, I can't really answer your question, but normally when you sweat, sometimes they call it cold sweat. Huh? This is because of the vasodilation, as well as because the sympathetic is cold sweat. Sorry, cold sweat because of the loss of heat by the sweating, and also because of the vasoconstriction actually in some of the cutaneous blood vessel. Okay, when you vasoconstrict, your skin become colder. Okay. So increased sympathetic to the sweat glands, increased sweating, but the increased vasoconstriction makes the skin feel cold. That's why.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah, Prof. Cheng, questions are coming. Number one, the first one come from Ahmad Fajri Widodo. Yeah, he said, Honorable Prof. Cheng, I would like to ask you about the sweat coming from the anxious condition. Is that any difference from the sweat from the exercise, especially the composition, such as the sodium and etc.? Yeah. Is it clear, Prof. Cheng?
Say that again, please.
Okay. He was asked about this sweat coming from the anxious condition. Is that any difference from the sweat from the exercise, especially the composition, such as the sodium and etc.? I think the composition of the sweat coming from the anxious condition.
What is the word? How do you spell it? Unstressed, is it?
Anxious, ANXI.
Cemas.
Yes.
Cemas.
Like anxiety. Yeah, anxiety condition. When we feel anxiety, maybe we sweat.
Oh, I see.
Then what is the is it the same composition or the sweat?
It's called cold. Sometimes they call it cold sweat, right? You're afraid.
Yeah.
I have no idea about the composition. Whether anyone has analyzed, because this will be quite a difficult situation to try to get samples. Sweat samples from people who, because normally it's a very acute kind of situation when they are frightened, and if they do sweat, I think it's difficult to do any research on those kind. Maybe you can do it in animals. You can frighten the rats. I don't know whether.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have no answer to your question here.
Okay. Mr. Ahmad Fajri,
Prof. Cheng,
you get it?
for the answer. Yes.
Okay.
It's another question related to my question before that.
Yep.
Actually, as your information before, that the sympathetic nervous system that can affect to the, for example, the cardiac muscle, and then also some of the parts that can affect to the sweat and for the especially for the homeostasis. I think, is that also one of the reason that people or human can get the cold sweat? Is that true about the sympathetics?
Yeah, in fact, I just mentioned that when we're trying to answer Dr. Sri's question. Yeah, so when you have cold sweat, it's due to two sympathetic action. One is in the skin, there's vasoconstriction, so the skin feels colder. And the second one is that the sympathetic also stimulate the sweat glands, so you have sweat. So you're cold, the skin feels cold, and then you sweat. So interestingly, the sympathetic that causes vasoconstriction secrete no adrenaline, whereas the sympathetic that causes sweating secretes acetylcholine. The two different kinds of sympathetic nerves. Yeah. Is that what you want to ask?
Yes, noted with thanks, Prof. Cheng. Thank you for your
Okay.
great answer. Thank you for the moderator.
Thank you, Ahmad Fajri. Thank you, Prof. Cheng. So, is there any question again? Okay, while we're waiting, Prof. Cheng, actually, personally, I have a question, but a bit out of the topic, maybe, because this is new for me. Yeah, to be honest, it's new for me for the physiology. But I'm really interested to ask about if someone related with the question from Ma'am Titin, from Miss Titin before, if someone have a condition unconscious like pingsan, pingsan, then most people give the person with something smell, right? Is it any relation what we do like that with the homeostasis to make the homeostasis come back in our body? Is it any relation, or what is the system called about that thing? Thank you, Prof.
I think the kind of stimulant, I don't know what they use now. I think you see that also in the recent Olympic Games. You know, especially I was following the weightlifting. So the coach tends to give the athlete something to smell, which seems to be allowed. I think it's not considered as doping because it's a very acute thing. And sometimes it's trying to just make the athlete more awake. It's nothing to do with homeostasis, because sometimes you see the coach slap the face. Slap the face. There was a case where it went viral. They thought the coach was hitting the athlete, but actually this is a Russian coach. I think, I can't remember. I think that's what they do normally. They try to activate the cortical performance. So I think the smell is basically for that. It hasn't got anything to do with homeostasis, because by definition, homeostasis, we are thinking about controlling normal values. So those kind of things are trying to increase performance by activating alertness and all that.
Yeah, so just as a stimulus, right?
Stimulus, yeah.
Okay.
Like drinking coffee.
Because you like drinking coffee. Okay, thank you, Prof. Cheng. Then there's another questions from Mr. Haris Kurnianto. Honorable Prof. Cheng, I would like to ask, sir, is there differentiate mechanism between sweat when we are eating spicy food and exercise? Okay, Mr. Haris, could you please to maybe ask your question directly and have a conversation with Prof. Cheng?
Yeah, it's the same kind of question as the person who asked about whether sweat in anxious situation is the same as sweat in exercise. So this kind of situation, I think perhaps we can actually do more experiment, because people are enjoying their food, and you pay them some money to take part in the experiment. So you can probably collect sweat from eating spicy food and measure. It'll be interesting to find out. I don't really know, but one of the things that has been shown is that because you tend to lose sodium in the sweat when you exercise, and obviously you tend to lose more sweat during exercise than when you sweat during eating, right? I don't think you sweat so much during eating. You definitely sweat in terms of the volume. So because of the tendency to lose sodium in your sweat, I think there are some literature that says that for trained athletes, that means those who are regular athletes, the amount of sweat, the amount of sodium in the sweat becomes less. It's part of compensation. It's part of adaptation. That means the sweat in the trained athletes, if I remember correctly, is even more hypotonic, because you don't want to lose so much sodium. Whereas, so that may be one difference. Whereas the sweat when you are eating, may be just normal sweat composition, because you eat only for a short time, right? You enjoy the food and then you sweat, and the volume of sweat obviously cannot be too large, right? When you enjoy your spicy food.
Okay. Is there whether, sir, any factor when we sweating, when eating or exercise? Is there any factor, maybe weathers?
Temperature.
Yeah.
The weather
The
condition.
temperature.
The weather,
Yes.
yeah, weather
Yeah,
condition.
weather
Oh, I
condition.
see. I don't know. Of course, I think if you eat spicy food in an air-conditioned room, you would tend to sweat less, I think. Obviously,
Yeah.
where you eat spicy food by your favorite, maybe store on the roadside. Some of the best food are those on the roadside. Under an umbrella, I think obviously you sweat more. Yeah, obviously the ambient temperature does affect the amount of sweat. Yeah.
Okay, Prof. Thank you for your explanation. Great
Okay.
explanation, sir. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Moderator.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Haris. Okay, we're still waiting. If to the all participants, if you have a question, we still have a time for the
Yeah.
question and answer session.
Excuse me, sir. I have a question.
Yes.
Yes,
Hi.
please.
Okay. Yes.
Hi everyone. It's Anissa Salsabila here. I'm from Physical Education Elementary School, and right now I wanna ask with you, sir, what if someone doesn't like water? It really affects all the activity we do every day. For example, like to exercise or when running, or someone who doesn't like to drink water, it can be seen from their body, or maybe, for example, their body look weak or get tired easily. And is it dangerous for health for the future impact? Thank you, sir.
So you're asking about a person who don't like to drink water,
Yeah.
but if that person is thirsty, he doesn't drink water.
What, sir?
When this person is thirsty, does he or she go and drink water?
She doesn't like water, but she really like,
Exercise.
yeah,
So when the person thirsty, so what they do?
always drink ice or cold water.
Yeah, so it's water.
Water,
Okay,
yeah.
Prof. Cheng,
But-
please.
But not normal water, sir.
Okay.
Oh, I see. I
Cold-
see.
cold
Not
water,
mineral
Prof.
water. Not mineral water. Maybe.
But that person will drink some fluid, right? Whether
Yes.
it's Coca-Cola or 100 plus,
Yeah.
then it's okay. As long as it's fluid, it's fine.
So it's okay, Prof. Cheng. If we doing exercise, then we sweat. We have a lot of sweat. So we drink like not mineral water, not normal water, but sweet, ice sweet.
It should be
So
okay, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Okay.
Of course, they would recommend drinking things like water, definitely,
Yeah.
to replace, and also because you lose electrolyte in the sweat. So obviously, sometimes they recommend that some of this mineral water with some electrolyte will be better, lah.
Okay, Anissa, is that answer your question?
Does that answer your question, the student?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe I will ask again. Like in ancient, that people want to decrease the weight, like won a competition, but in the competition have the class, and for a short time they want to lose the weight, and they will use like they're running exercise in the hot temperature, also use the jacket, sauna jacket, and then they will lose so many sweat, and I think also will be get dehydration. So what do you think? What is the best the best activity to increase, to decrease weight, but not to get dehydration?
Yeah, so they always say the best way is to count your calories, the intake and outtake, intake and output. Yeah, because if your energy intake is greater than the output, then obviously you will tend to put on weight. Yeah, so that's the best thing. Whereas if you lose weight by sweating, then you're just reducing the total amount of body water, because your body water is about 60% of your body weight. So you can lose significantly your weight, but that would not be good because it's dehydration actually. So apparently they say that the formula, the Grand Prix, the racing driver can actually lose a lot of weight if they don't drink water. So they're always drinking water when they're driving because of the hot climate. Huh? Yeah. So so the best way is to count calories. That means if you eat more, then you have to exercise more. Yeah. So when you are in negative energy balance, then you will tend to lose weight.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we still have the last 10 minutes for the question and answer session.
Wow, so fast. I think any wants to asking again. I think Fatri Widodo want asking again, right?
No rusher, no rush.
Oh, okay, Haris. Okay. Man lai.
Sorry, Professor Cheng.
Hello.
Can I just feel the time? I mean,
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, just related to my previous question before that about the sweat concentration. As you told us before that we can analyze the sweat concentration. For example, the difference between the exercise sweat concentration, the unexercised, and then also the eating sweat concentration, something like that, right? And then which part of our body that has high concentration of sweat? So for example, from the blood, for sure, if we will measure for the blood concentration, we need to measure it from the artery, right? Because if we will measure it from the veins, it has less of concentration. For example, it has a high concentration of carbon CO2, something like that. So we need to measure it from the base part of our body. So for the sweat, which part that has high concentration of sweat? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I understand your question. So the sodium concentration in your sweat is obviously external, the body fluid, okay. But internally, the sodium concentration outside the cell is always controlled. So it's basically the same everywhere in the body, except for one part of the kidney where there's a unusual region of high osmolarity. But the extracellular fluid sodium concentration is the same throughout. Yeah. And that means that whether it's venous blood or arterial blood, your sodium concentration should be the same. That means it's an isotonic, it's an almost isotonic sodium concentration. Yeah. So most of the body osmolarity is due to sodium salt. Yeah. Whereas sweat is always hypotonic. Yeah.
So I mean, like the concentration from the sweat from the neck or from our arm or from our face is just the same concentration?
Should be, yeah. Because now, I mean, logically it should be the same because it's all stimulated by the sympathetic cholinergic nerve. So I mean, those who are expert in, I actually know a Japanese professor whose one of his research interests is working on sweat glands. So he talks about different types of sweat glands. So if you ask him the same question, maybe he will say that, oh, some parts of the body may be slightly different. But this is a special interest group, yeah. So, but my own understanding is that it should be the same, but maybe there may be, depending on the distribution of different types of sweat glands.
Thank you, Prof. Cheng, for the answer.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Prof. Cheng, still questions in the chat menu. May I read this? From the question come from Robin.
Yo,
Yes.
YouTube 2 menit.
Sorry for everybody. Another participant, please kindly to turn off your microphone. Okay, I'll continue, Prof. Cheng. Introduce, I'm Robin, sir. I would asking you, how can we consistently live a good lifestyle, even though our environment doesn't support? How can we consistently in a good lifestyle, live in a good lifestyle, even though our environment doesn't support? How we can still consistent? Yeah.
Okay, Robin, I assume this is not a physiology question. Yeah, so different people will have different answers for you. When you say environmental does not support, I suppose you might be thinking about also the COVID corona situation where you cannot go out so much to exercise. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so I am not the expert on this, obviously. My own lifestyle is, I wouldn't say very good because I don't exercise as much as I should. But they always say the best thing is in everything in moderation, quantity of food, amount of salt and sugar, and of course, good lifestyle would include good activity, exercise, and all that. Yeah. So, and of course, in terms of our mental health so you need friends. I think friends are very important. Friends, family is very important, and I think of course this is going beyond physiology, even neurophysiology. Our faith, I think spiritual faith is important for our good lifestyle. Yeah. Yeah. So this is my general answer to you.
So you think the most important is the good environment, right?
Yeah, the good environment. You're talking about the physical environment,
right?
Yeah, depends on where you live. Obviously, some environments are better than others, but if we can move around a bit more, we can actually, I suppose, travel a short distance to a better environment, for example, to exercise. Yeah, so it depends on our environment. If our environment is naturally good, of course, we can just exercise in our garden or that. Yeah. So I don't know whether that's what you're trying to ask. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Robin.
Okay. So for the our invited speaker, Prof. Cheng, you allowed how many more questions? So I can facilitate the participant to ask their question. Do you have like maybe 3 or more questions, Prof. Cheng?
Oh, I see. For me, yeah, we can have three more questions. Maybe.
Okay, 3 more questions, right? So to the all participants, please. There are 3 more questions. But actually, you also, after this guest lecture, you also can contact Prof. Cheng, because Prof. Cheng already show his a number for the more communication. So you can have a conversation and after this guest lecture is over. Okay, I see here, Ma'am Satya Rahayu. Do you want to have a conversation or maybe ask question to Prof. Cheng? Yeah. Okay. Right. So, Prof. Cheng, while we waiting, I'm gonna make sure again. I don't want to, when after this case lecture done, then I have a miss and wrong statement. So now I can say like when everybody gets sweat, it's not always in a good condition. Is it true or false? If someone gets sweat, he or she always in a good condition. Is it true?
You're asking me?
Yes, Prof, please.
When you sweat during exercise,
Yes.
obviously physiologically it is good. You are maintaining body temperature while you are maintaining your health. So that is good. There's no problem here.
Okay, so yeah, but if we don't do anything, then sweat suddenly come out. So maybe it's not in good condition, our body.
Oh yes, some people have this problem. It's actually a pathophysiology problem where the person is resting,
Yep.
and in certain parts of the body has a lot of sweat.
Yeah.
So you can actually feel their hands. Maybe it's actually wet. Yeah. So
Yeah. Okay.
that one is obviously neurological, the nerves or the sweat glands. So
Yeah.
the sweat is always associated naturally and physiologically with exercise, in order to thermoregulate.
Okay. And then continue. Then for I have friends actually. Then we work together as in the aerobic instructor, aerobic. But after 45 minutes doing aerobic, we know with the high impact, but she's not look sweaty. So what happened? Is it something wrong in her body system, or still normal?
Is she a trained athlete? Is she?
Yes. She's she's aerobic instructor.
Oh, but there's no problem with her, right?
Yeah, no problem. But
okay.
Yeah, but no sweat with the other people already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's actually interesting that some people respond to their response. Their sweating response is different. It's not, and this is all part of their thermoregulation. That means the homeostatic mechanism is different. As long as they're healthy, that's fine. Yeah. So so some people just sitting in the kitchen, if the fan is not on, they start to sweat. Yeah, even without exercising, and even before they eat the spicy food, they start to sweat.
Yeah.
As long as that person is maintaining their body temperature and still fine, there's no problem.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Cheng. Then
you have a question from Dr. Agus in the YouTube.
Okay.
So I'm sorry because in here in Zoom already full, so many students also the participant join in YouTube, and you can directly. Wahyu, you want to read
yeah.
it?
Okay. Thank you. The question come from Dr. Agus. Prof. Cheng, do you have information why many long COVID patients develops hyponatremia? Hyponatremia. Thanks.
Yeah. So that's an interesting question that I wasn't aware of until I think a few weeks ago. Somebody asked a similar question. So now which I didn't mention in my lecture is that now we know that the way in which the COVID virus enters the body is actually through is linked to the Renin-Angiotensin System. The RAAS system that we talked about early on. So the formation of renin then leads to A1, then A2. Now A1 to A2 is converted mainly in the lungs by an enzyme called the angiotensin converting enzyme, ACE. So there are several types of ACE, and apparently one of the ACE type is the entry point for the COVID virus. And of course, the RAAS system is linked to sodium physiology. So there may be a link there. I haven't actually thought about this, but this is the second time I'm hearing this question, that in Dr. Agus' question, long COVID patient suffers from hyponatremia. So that's an interesting question which I haven't sorted out, but thank you for asking, Dr. Agus. It may be linked to the renin-angiotensin system, yeah.
Oh, it's difficult topic for us. Maybe for medical doctor it's easy. Since for student in sports science, but it's good. So make us to excited to study of physiology. And you get greeting from Miss Baito, Miss Siti Baito also.
Okay.
Here, why you have any question again?
Okay. Question come from my name is Rifos. Yeah, my name is Rifos. Prof. Cheng, and I have a question. Can sweating be used as an indication of an effective training? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the example given by Wayu that her friend doesn't sweat very much, whereas he and his other aerobic instructor sweats a lot, would tell you that most likely it cannot be. It's not like heart rate. Huh? I think you know from sports science that the changes in heart rate is definitely quite a good indicator, but definitely not sweating. Yeah.
So sweating is not the one of the indicate that the exercise we can say effective or not, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Rifos. You get the answer. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prof. He said, yeah. Thank you. Right.
Okay. Sweating is not correlated with the exercise, but with heart rate, right? Not correlated. How about the lactate, Professor Cheng Ming? So increase lactate also increase heart rate?
Yeah, I haven't been following the literature, but I remember reading something about measuring lactate as an indicator of sports performance. Yeah, I don't have the answer for you, but I do remember some literature wanting to use that as an indicator of how the athlete's muscle performance may actually, I mean, in other words, their ability to oxidize the substrate is better, so they release less lactate. And if they release less lactic acid, it means they can actually experience muscle fatigue later. I mean, I think that's the concept. Right? So that one, I think you probably know more than me.
Okay, maybe next time you will be give guest lecture again. Okay, well, you back to you.
Okay, thank you. I think we almost in the end of this part, question and answer, Prof. Cheng. Because for the participant, I think, I can wait for the last 2 minutes, please, for the participants. You still have 2 minutes, last 2 minutes to ask question to Prof. Cheng. While I'm doing like a conclusion before we finish, but I think I have to make a lot of conclusion, but I have to just set only one conclusion for this special guest lecture with Prof. Cheng. Because the physiology, maybe if you talk about physiology, there's a lot of things that we have to share, right, Prof. Cheng? But in this session, we only focus in the sweat, blood, urine, and the homeostasis basic. Homeostasis is the fundamental in the physiology, right, Prof. Cheng? So I think for everyone, all the participants here, hopefully you get more experience, more knowledge after you join this guest lecture. Okay. Yep. Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, finally we come to the end of this guest lecture. And before closing, maybe I want to draw the conclusion of this guest lecture. Is for me as a moderator, I can say sweat, blood, and urine are important parts inside our body to support automatic processes and mechanisms that are carried out to maintain a constant condition so that the body can function normally despite change in the environment inside or outside the body. Okay, that's all for the guest lecture. And then I would like to say thank you very much to Prof. Cheng Ming, PhD from University of Malaya for the informative and interesting presentation, and also all of the participants for your very participation. And then finally, please, for everybody, wherever you are, please give big applause for Prof. Cheng. Thank you very much for your presentation. And also thank you to the all participants for joining this guest lecture. Then Wahyu Ragil Kurniawan will say thank you very much for the Universitas Negeri Semarang Faculty of Sport Science for organizing this guest lecture. Sometimes we will meet again in the other guest lecture or webinar maybe. Okay, then to the all participants, I will share the link for the e-certificate issuance. So please kindly check. Then so one more. Thank you to Professor Cheng Ming, PhD. See you next time. And then thank you for your experience, your knowledge. It's really, really, we take a lot of benefits after this guest lecture is over. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, thank you
Cheng.
very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Prof.
Cheng.
Cheng.
Thank you also for all doctor in
Pak
Indonesia.
Wahyu Ragil.
Thank you.
Terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna share the link for the e-certificate issuance for the all participants. Please kindly check. Wait for a minute. I'm gonna share the.
How about the certificate for Prof. Cheng Ming?
Okay, Prof. Cheng Ming, you also, sorry, thank you, Ma'am Titin, for mentioning about the certificate. The certificate I'm gonna directly send to Ma'am Titin, then Ma'am Titin will send to Prof. Cheng.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
I see you.
Okay. Oh, wait for a second.
Not
Prof.
yet.
Cheng, we will take picture first.
Okay.
Okay, wait, I'm gonna share the link first. Then I'm gonna read in the chat menu of also, wait. Okay, yeah, this is maybe for the participant, you can capture this and then you can fill the e-certificate issuance. Already? Yep. Okay, I'm gonna stop share. I'm gonna read in the chat menu first because this is only 60 minutes open after the guest lecture is over. So I'm gonna write on the chat menu. Okay, that's a link in the chat menu. You can check, then fill it right after this guest lecture is over. Thank you very much. Okay, we back to the photo session, please. Okay, take your position. Right. Wait, and the slide one. Okay, turn on your camera. Turn on your camera for everyone. 3, 2, 1. Okay, wait. Okay. You can show like this. Okay, thank you. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, next slide. Cheers. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Next slide. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Right. So, okay. Thank you, because there's a lot of slides, so I think it's enough. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye, Prof. Cheng. See you next time. Okay, right. Thank you very much. So I'm Wahyu Ragil Kurniawan as the moderator. Thank you for joining this guest lecture. I'm very happy. Then to the all participants, thank you very much for your participation, active being in the question and answer, and hopefully Universitas Negeri Semarang, especially Faculty of Sport Science, can set up again another guest lecture with you guys. Then you can take more knowledge and then add your more experience, more resources related about anything about sport, especially with Universitas Negeri Semarang Sport Science Faculty. Okay, thank you very much. This is the end. So please fill the form for the e-certificate issuance, because I remind you again, that's only 60 minutes after this guest lecture is over. So please fill, and then make sure your email and your name should be in the correct spelling. Okay, thank you. Selamat siang, good afternoon. Sampai jumpa lagi di guest lecture berikutnya. See you to the next guest lecture. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Bu
kasih.
Setia. Terima
Terima
kasih
kasih
Bu Titi
Wahyu.
semuanya.
mahasiswa
Terima
yang
kasih.
sudah hadir pada
Terima kasih seluruh
perkuliahan
mahasiswa
ya.
semuanya. Semoga bermanfaat, Bapak Ibu dosen dari universitas. Tidak bisa saya sebutkan satu persatu. Terima kasih sekali lagi atas partisipasinya, atas supportnya. Semoga bermanfaat.
Okay.
Bu
Good
Titin
job,
masih
Rakil.
jadi host. Ya, thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Terima kasih sudah dibantu. Ini bisa untuk live teman-teman partisipan boleh live. Terima kasih banyak. Bu Titin
Ini
masih jadi
bagus.
host ya.
Aku masih jadi host. Ini saya matikan.
Oke. Terima kasih. Terima kasih.
Mungkin Pak Mustafa, YouTube-nya bisa diselesaikan.
Pak Mustafa, terima kasih banyak.
Terima
Thank you very
kasih
much,
Dr.
Pak Mustafa.
Adrianta tidak bersuara tadi. Ini tadi sebenarnya banyak para dokter dari perkumpulan EIV.
Ya, saya tidak bisa
Ahli
mention
ilmu faal Indonesia.
satu-satu. Mohon
Ya.
maaf semuanya.
Nggak apa-apa. Ada Dr.
Terima kasih
Agus
banyak.
juga. Oke. Ya, saya matikan.
Ya, terima kasih Bu Titin.